I organised the meetup. We've got a Twitter handle, CSS Meetup, where I try and tweet out in advance when I'm going to launch the event so you can get a seat. This has been, over RSVPing for the last few minutes, which is awesome. That's nice to see. Ooh, that's quite loud. Is there a way to turn it down?
Probably.
We have a special guest robot here. We have Dudley Story, who's originally from New Zealand, but she'll now based in Canada. Is that right?
Hello.
Dudley? Hi. And Dudley has an awesome blog. Off the top of my head, do you know? Demosthenes. Yeah. .com. Have a chat to him if you get a chance. Yes. Thank you to our sponsors, Raygun, who are here today, and they have provided all the drinks and pizza tonight, which is awesome. Yay, thanks Raygun. They're currently looking for a front-end engineer, so if you're interested, you should talk to JD. He's going to share a bit more about Raygun later. And also to Optimal for lending us their space this evening. Really generous. I'm going to do really super quick intros around the room because there are always new faces. So we're going to do your name and just one really quick CSS thing you're interested in learning more about. So I'm Amanda, and I am interested in CSS naming conventions of classes. Go.
I'm Cameron, and probably more about typography, actually.
I'm Laura, and I'd like to learn more about CSS layouts.
I'm Tatiana. I'm interested in what's the maximum you can do with CSS.
I'm Ruth, and I'm interested in using box shadow for animations.
I'm Carl, and I'm interested in learning more about the Flexbox style of laying websites.
I'm JD, and I don't really code anymore, so I'm kind of curious about what's coming with CSS4.
I'd like to learn more about SAS and things like that, extending CSS.
I'm Mike, and I'm interested in better putting out sort of CSS projects and how to better structure files.
I'm Remy. I'm interested in CSS animations.
Cool.
I'm Jacob. I'm interested in making big projects a lot smaller.
Hi, I'm Serena. You're gonna die. Can't see it anymore.
It's gone.
It might be nicer to do underlines. Nice. Let's try. I'm Dana, and I'm interested in CSS animations.
I'm Max, and I'm interested in everything about CSS.
I'm Nathan, and I'm interested in just good ways to structure CSS.
I'm Troy, and I'd like to know how Pandas works one day.
I'm Ryan, and I'm interested in CSS structure for large apps.
Pepper, and right now I'm interested in making the CSS as tidy and
Hey everyone, how's this good here? In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to recreate the Instagram.
I'm Nick, and I'm interested in animations.
Cool.
I'm Mike, and I'm interested in CSS transitions, animations, and also Flexbox.
Hi, I'm Claire. I'm interested in CSS animation.
Hi, I'm Amber, and I'm interested in learning about how to use SVGs.
That's me turning on the ground.
I'm James and I'm interested in CSS animations.
I'm Emma. I'm interested in getting my JavaScript to talk to my CSS.
And I'm interested in figuring out things that Flexbox might be good at in terms of layout and not to use it as well.
Cool.
I'm Guy, and I'm really sort of want to find out more about SAS because I've know a bit about it, but don't know much about using it.
Hey, I'm Mark, and I'm interested in figuring out the best situation to use CSS transitions as opposed to like JavaScript alternatives like Velocity.
Cool.
I'm Hillary, and I don't actually know any CSS, so something would be good.
I'm Matt, and I'm interested in learning more about Compass, and in particular when we can kill it.
I'm Jess. At the moment, I'm interested in SVG, the illustration, and maybe animating that with CSS.
Hey, I'm Michael, and I'm interested in how CSS can be used like more in a minimal way, but to also make your designs even better as well.
Hey, I'm Ellery. I'm interested in SAS and animations.
Dudley, did you have a...
I'm Dudley, and I wrote a book on CSS animations and transitions. So.
Okay, awesome. That's given me ideas for future talks, which is good. Laura, you're up.
That's me.
Yes. I just have to change this over.
Oh, no. I need them. Hi everyone, I'm Laura. Just a little disclaimer, I'm in no way an expert on this. It's just something I was interested in enough to go away and research it for the benefit of all of you guys. Because I realized I was kind of doing stuff automatically and I didn't really understand a lot of it. This is backwards. Hold on. So there's a few things I'm going to cover today. Some default formatting rules that a browser will automatically apply, sizing type on the web, different typefaces you can use, and some basic typography principles. So there are a few things that you need to be aware will happen unless you tell the browser otherwise. Most of these you'll probably already be well aware of, like that all of your A tags will be underlined and be blue. But there are others as well, like that the P and H, the header tags, all have margins attached to them, unless you take them off. And you'll notice that the font sizes are listed in EMs, which I'll get to in a minute. One of the things I haven't listed here is that, of course, without declaring anything, all of your text will be in Times New Roman, unless you're using a Linux OS. Each browser can treat the individual elements a little differently, like buttons and lists, and you can check out what browsers will do by default in more detail in the links I've popped in the bottom there. And I'll pop this slideshow on the CSS page for everyone to see later. So by default, HTML is going to be given a font size of 100%, which is equal to about 1 EM, which is equal to about 16 pixels, and you'll know why it's about very soon. And you'll also be given a default line height of about 1.2 EMs. So there are a heap of different ways to declare your font sizes. Each has its upsides and downsides, and some just shouldn't ever be used on the web at all. Absolute sizes, MM, CM, IM, PC, and PT, refer to print sizes and should only ever be used in print style sheets. Relative sizes will tell it to size the text smaller or larger depending on its parent, which is pretty obvious. Length is the tricky one. You've got absolute length units, which is pixels, which is the size of a single pixel on your screen. EM and EX are relative length units, so they're not always going to be a definite size. And the thing to note about the length and percentage values is that they will all cascade and multiply. And the percentage one is probably the easiest one to get your head around, as it's obviously just the percentage of its parent. And there are also the keywords which you can use, which are fairly self-explanatory. They do translate about the same across different browsers, but not always. So there are a few that I'm going to go into a bit more detail now. Pixels is the one you're probably most used to using, but what you might not know is that users on IE6 won't be able to resize your text. If they are sight impaired, they won't be able to zoom in. And it's not mobile friendly, especially for pixel dense devices like the new iPhones and Apple products. EM what's going on?
I have to disconnect and re.
Disconnected.
Oh, spinning wheel.
Good things.
Oh man, I have
special.
we have spinning beach ball of death.
Oh man.
I wonder if it's Chrome or Google thing as well. I don't know. Too many things are.
Technology hates me today.
I don't even know what to do. What do I press?
You could force restart, like hold down the power button.
Maybe we'll go.
See what's not responding.
Oh, wait. No, it's.
Oh. Oh, my tabs.
Yeah.
Chrome, yeah, Chrome crashed.
Usually it's screaming, but practically.
Maybe you just try to disconnect.
Oh no, it's
Oh, it's not the incognito window.
Oh yeah.
That's alright, I can look back Damn, we were so well prepared.
Is it okay if we don't do
We just added JVM.
This is like
They're very precise, but they don't translate well to mobile or different browsers. So moving on to EMs, which is something that I prefer to use. It's kind of like a multiplier, as in one EM is going to be 100% of your page, whatever its parent is set to. So say if your body is set to have a font size of 100%, it means everything in there is going to have a font size of 100% or 1 EM. They're the same thing. The pros of using EMs is that it is mobile friendly. It's going to translate well on a small device. All those lovely Internet Explorer 6 users are able to resize, but it still has a few cons in that it's not exactly the same over different browsers. It does cascade. You need to be aware of when you're nesting divs, and IE 6 and 7 do distort the size quite a bit. And then you've got your percentage, which has the most pros and the least cons. So IE 6 and 7 shows it the most accurately, yay, but it's still not 100% the same over all the different browsers. So I do have a few recommendations to get your font sizes the same on most devices, which is to set your body to have a font size of 100%, because that is the most universally reliable one to use, and then set your individual styles using EMs. It's consistent, reliable, and it's mobile friendly, or just multi-device friendly. And there's an article down the bottom where I pretty much copied it, but no one's going to mind. I agree. So these are the font families that most operating systems are going to have installed. Now, while you might look and think, oh god, why are you making me look at this? It is important to understand and know these typefaces pretty well to have them in your redundancy stack. So that's in case your first choice doesn't work. So there are several options popping up on the web that offer fonts other than those that come default on machine. Most of them you probably know very well. There's Google Fonts, which hosts the fonts on their server, and you import them using that @import at the beginning of your style sheet. And Font Squirrel and Font Spring package up font face packages for you, which you then declare at the beginning as well. The thing to remember is that for each unique font you are using in your web page, you're increasing the load time, and people aren't going to wait forever. So I'm just going to go over font face briefly. So if you want to use a font that is not come default on a OS, there are a few different files you need to have it get working on most browsers. And let's be honest, this is mainly for Internet Explorer users. So for our Design Gel website, we've used this for our heading font, which is Nevis, which is a free font, and we've managed to find all of these different file types. So once you've got them in a stack, it will look like this, which you can then declare in the rest of your style sheet using the font name that you've allocated to it. So for all of our H1 tags, we've got the Nevis font, and then our graceful degradation down into sans serif. We've declared a font size of 3.58 EMs, which is going to be 3.5 times our HTML body size. And we've just popped in the text transform rule, set it to uppercase, so we don't have to individually go and make sure all of our headings are in caps. And that's a very useful tool, especially when clients keep changing their minds. You don't want to have to be going back and rewriting all of the headers. So now I'm going to move on to typefaces, families, and how to use them in the web. So I've just taken a font that was in my library, Futura, and as you can see, there's quite a few different weights, and there's also, for every weight, there's also an oblique version. Something that you might not be aware of is that sans serif fonts have obliques, and serif fonts have italics. So if you are using a sans serif font and you've put the font style to italic, and it doesn't have one, it's going to render one automatically, and that might not be what you want. So if the font you're using does have an oblique, use that option because the typographer has gone to the effort to making it for you. So for any typeface that you're considering using in your website, it's important to go and look into the family to see how many options there are available to you. Especially for something like a body font, you may not want something that only has one weight and no predetermined italic. Because further down the line, you'll find that when you ask it to do something, it will do it badly, or it won't do it all. It won't do it at all because that font doesn't exist in the family. With the font style, you can declare the font to be normal, italic, or oblique. Italic is it's like a special font, like they've actually redrawn the letters, whereas an oblique is just the same letters tilted. So that's the difference there. And you've also got the font variant of normal and small caps. Just thought I'd point it out, might be useful, don't know. So now into font weights. There are a few different ways you can declare it using the normal, bold, light tags, which are only going to work if your font has those files in its family. Otherwise, you've got the bolder and lighter, which is those relative terms, the same with smaller and larger and type size. And you've got these numbers. Now, the numbers might seem really useful. You might think, I want a really, really thin weight, so I'm going to set the font weight to 100. And that will work really well if the font family you're using has a lot of different weights. So this is Futura, which is the one I was talking about before. And as you can see, that one had about 4 or 5 different weights in it, which you can see from the 100 is a very thin, and then there's another one for 300 and 400, 500, a couple for 6 and 7, and then a really heavy one for 8 and 9. But if you try to apply this to a font where it doesn't have those automatically in the package, it's only going to render the ones that it has. So for Times New Roman, on my computer, I've only got the normal and the bold weight. So even with the font weight at 100, it's still going to render the same as 400 because that file doesn't exist. Same with 500 to 900, it's all the same because it only has 2 to choose from. So now onto a few basic type principles. You're all going to get real mad at me at this because I'm a little bit of type Nazi. What am I up to? So the most important things when you're thinking about type is the legibility. Can I actually understand the letters? Can I read the whole word? As in, I'm not putting white text on a very light picture. And the other thing is the readability, as in, does it make me want to read it? Is it inviting to read? Does it look easy to read? So one of the easiest ways to make your type more legible is to look at your column width. So I've just used some placeholder text here. And the easiest way to do this with CSS is using the max width principle, the max width rule. So if you don't set one, all of your divs are going to be as wide as they can fit. Now, you might not think this is a big issue, especially if it's just a couple of lines, but having an unreasonably wide column width can hinder the reading experience dramatically. If you have it too long, you have trouble keeping on the same line. It's really easy to start reading the one above or the one below. And it becomes tiring, it doesn't look inviting to read at all. But on the other hand, if you have it too short, reading becomes a hassle, it's fragmented, and it's harder to get a really fluid reading rhythm going. Something in the middle works best. Obviously, it encourages people to read your content because it looks easy to read. If you're interested, something between 40 and 80 characters per column is recommended, and this one is 60 characters, which was surprising because it was a complete estimate. And if we go to this letter count website that I used to check how many words were in my column, it becomes very obvious as to why you need to do it. That text, no one wants to read that text. Full screen. Great. And using the max width property is great for different devices because it means on a small device it's just going to take up as much width as it can, and as the screen gets bigger it will stop after a point. So something like this would probably have a max width of about 500 pixels, and after that it won't stretch anymore. The next thing is the line height, or leading as typographers will call it. That is the space between the lines. So one line here, that line there, so there's only about that much space between them. Similarly to columns, if you have your lines too short, it becomes hard to differentiate between the different lines. Like that. That's very, very short leading. It's very hard. It looks very dense. But if you have the line height too high, as in you have too much space between the words, the reading becomes fragmented. So a good way to figure out if your leading is on track or not is to kind of squint your eyes. It sounds really funny, but bear with me. Squint your eyes and see what kind of shade of grey your paragraph is. And it should be something that's very, very middle. If you have your leading too small, the paragraphs will look very, very dense and very dark. And if you have your leading too much, your paragraphs will look very, very light. So something in the middle works best. And by default, the line height is about 1.2 EMs, which is usually about right. But if you have a typeface that is very light, you may need to decrease your line height. Or if you have a typeface that is very heavy, you may need to give it a bit more room. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering about this awful little widow I have here. CSS doesn't really have a lot to combat this right now, which is frustrating. But what is available right now is the widows and orphans rules, which are available if you're using page content, like if you have an article spread over 3 or 4 pages. So if I set the widows to nothing, just auto, you can see I've got 2 lines or 1.5 lines on the right-hand column. But if I set the widows to 3, it's going to automatically move some of the lines over there. And that helps keep the text flowing nicely so you're not turning the page and forgetting what you've already read. But the thing to note with this is that they only work with WebKit browsers right now. And the same with orphans is the number of lines you've got left on the page before. So if I set the orphans to auto here, I've got 2 lines here. But if I set the orphans to 3, it's going to move some of the lines over. Yeah. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is how color can affect your typography. So here I've taken exactly the same text, I've just put it on a black background and changed the text to white. So by doing this, I've drastically changed the readability. The white text kind of sinks into the background and it optically looks smaller. You can combat this by making the type slightly heavier or larger and increasing the line height, which I then do. And side by side, you can see the difference clearly. They look more like the same shade of grey now. This applies to any dark background, or similarly, if you're using a white background but your text is grey or not black. So, some conclusions. Set your body to 100% and use side note font sizes set in EMs for optimum reliability. Have well-known redundancies in place when using a font face. So if your fonts don't load, you know you've got a reliable typeface behind it. Font weights and italics only work when that font exists in the family you're using. Set a max width ensures good readability. Adjust your line height to suit font weight and colour. So those small things can make people want to engage with your content a lot more, and it's the little things that make a difference. And I've just got a few references from where I've gotten my info. And that's it. Thanks. the Meetup page later.
Thank you.
All good.
Any questions while I quickly transfer Jamie's presentation?
Oh, nice underlines. Because if you set the underlines, like your regular links, they can be really, really close to the words, and it can be hard to read them sometimes. But if you get rid of the underlines and instead give it a bottom border, you can set that border to be as far away as you like.
Yeah, but it's too low. It's like true underline should be a bit higher.
Yeah.
And there's no way to set the border bottom.
Also, the border affects the box model of what you're
so
doing, so kind of you end up with like weird sort of heights in paragraphs.
It looks pretty weird when it wraps as well. It's like this.
Oh, and the other thing is if you have inline images or other things that affect, it puts the border under the image.
Assuming that a tag is inline, couldn't you just set position relative on it and use a after pseudo element and like give it a 100% in place if you want to? Yeah. You can make it
It sounds really
And if you just use if you select it using PA, then it's only going to select the links in a paragraph and not your images or anything.
Yeah, but what about lists, block quotes, menus? There's so many.
There's a few different things.
You can also use box shadow to make really sexy underlines.
I've also seen median using gradient.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
Okay, while we wait for our next presenter, we've got design as a job, so it's more of a designing thing, but this was totally relevant to anyone doing client work or even big projects in a big team. It's more of a how to deal with people rather than being designer. It's really good, yeah. So, Laura, if you've got a question.
Yeah, so my question was, what does the font variant rule, what can you do with it?
Yes, me.
Turn small caps on.
That's it, yeah.
We got 2 more minutes. Should have been a longer question. Okay. Where you go? Next up, Jay.
Hey everybody, my name's John Daniel Trust, and everybody just calls me JD. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mindscape. We build a product called Raygun, which Amanda previously mentioned earlier. And I've come along tonight to support Ian here. It's his first time presenting at a user group, and he does all of the design work and all the great stuff that we've been doing with Raygun and even Mindscape. Let's even design the t-shirt. Which we have some of tonight, and Hillary at the back will be able to hand some of them out in stickers. So that's my background anyway. Do you want to tell me about yourself?
Yeah. So I'm the designer, kind of coder, all front end, as well as I like to play around with JavaScript and Canvas and animations and all the fun stuff.
Yep.
So.
We'll dive into it then.
Yes.
Nope. So Carl's going to run most of this, by the way. I'm just here to on it.
Okay, so what we're going to cover here is going to go over CSS with like jQuery innovations versus CSS free performance, and what's better when you choose what, yada yada. How to make your applications run a lot smoother, or your web application animations on mobile devices. There's a couple of hacks in there which are easy to implement, and it makes your web app feel way more native. And a couple of libraries I use for just faster productivity, like SAS and stuff like that.
You can put it now.
Okay, so CSS versus JavaScript. The upside of CSS is that it creates a lot of smoother animations. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I'll tell you a story. So about no, it's an insurance. So when Kyle first joined the team, we started looking at trying to animate something on the Mindscape site, and this was about 2.5 years ago now, I think, right? And so we were trying all sorts of things. We tried Canvas, we tried some stuff with normal JavaScript, and we just kept running into performance problems in different scenarios, including the fact that Chrome on Mac was horribly, horribly outdated on the performance front, which led to coming up and finding some of these solutions as well as problems that occur in certain places. But anyway.
Okay, yeah, so JavaScript currently uses the animate property. It creates a callback, which is like a 160, tries to replicate a 60 frame per second image, where if it can't do it, the garbage collector doesn't work properly and it stutters a lot, which isn't so visible if it's a lightweight element, but if it's a massive element, it looks pretty good. Well, what you can do is, well, it's best to use the request animation frame. That's for Canvas, but all CSS3 animations also fail within that sort of document model request animation frame thing.
The final point there, this was actually where we kind of got into actually getting some performance improvements in the animations that we were doing. Because up until relatively recently, if you wanted to animate, you'd use something like the set timeout callback, which, yeah, when you try to simulate that 60 frames a second, is never in sync with the draw balls that are happening in the browser. Well, this guy here is really handy because it's actually in sync with how the browser is rendering. So it's right in sync with the paint calls that the browser is natively doing, so you create that smoother animation with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's really easy to set up a polyfill as well on that, so that if it's not available on an older browser, you just fall back to a set timeout, which is janky, but if they're using a shitty browser anyway, they're pretty used to life sucking. So. Go, next slide.
Next slide. Yeah. Okay, you know, hurry up.
So just escape here, I think. Yeah, so Kyle works on a Windows PC as well, so just to throw him in the deep and we'll set him up on Chrome down there.
Sweet. So I was trying to make an easy demo to show how much better using hardware acceleration was using like animations, because I think it was like 2 years ago when I first looked at it. You had to use a nasty hack where you had to use a transform translate 3D to kind of access the browser's GPU, which makes animations run way smoother. But it seems to be like a standard for desktop browsers now, at least.
Yeah, they would pretty much, because it was 3D, trick it into going, oh, I need to apply 3D transforms to this, so I'll accelerate this. But if it was just 2D, it kind of went, oh, I can do this in software, and it really couldn't. So
yeah, so that kind of doesn't fit in with what I wanted to kind of go with here. But on mobile devices, if you have a like nice slide down navigation slide across, you can sometimes see on your phone that it looks.
I was just curious, is CSS actually more battery intensive than jQuery?
That's where I'm getting to. Oh, no, that one actually.
CSS is or not? No.
Depends whether or not the JavaScript is utilizing the GPU performance, which was where this is going. When you use the transform translate 3D effect on making navigation slide out, and it looks cool, but it's best not to use it everywhere because using that GPU does use more battery life. It does make it look nicer, but it's just user-friendly, it's awesome, but not everywhere.
It's also a hard thing to talk about because obviously the browsers and stuff are moving so quickly. I mean, that's the fascinating thing while we were putting together this presentation was even noticing how much things have moved since we first tried to create that animation for the Mindscape website. And nowadays, all of the things we were worried about then, we almost don't even think about now because they're just there in the modern browsers.
Yeah, I tried to make a really nested thing and span the page with that to see if I can make it like that and show some performance increase, but it behaved so much better than it did a couple of years ago that it was kind of not worth.
We're also going to host all these demos somewhere so people can grab the code and have a look.
Okay. So the next thing we're going to jump into was talking about
How can you not?
What happened there?
I don't know. Minimize it. Well, it's loading it off the disk, so.
Slowing up here.
Yeah.
I pressed something.
I mean, that's about,
Broken.
We have to talk about cooking as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not being much different.
I think it's like
Okay.
No.
Shut up! Sorry. So for the first thing, we're going to just show a little bit of how fast animations are in the browser. So for the first thing, we're using a jQuery animate sort of thing to just replicate, using the top left and right to animate dots out from a centralized point. So it's just 500. It's not very nice. It looks pretty average. That's just using top left and top right. The next thing we're going to do, did we talk about how CSS is kind of worse than a decent JavaScript library?
we haven't got to it yet. That was the grand finale. But
okay, yeah. So basically, CSS3 is faster than jQuery, hands down. It's just not even worth mentioning, but it's not as fast as proper JavaScript that has been written for animation, and this is pretty much what this is showcasing. So here we show jQuery doing its thing pretty poorly. We jump to CSS. Yep.
So this is using a library called Zipper that actually then applies some CSS stuff to actually transform the values. So rather than just setting them through the DOM, it's actually just effectively handing off to the CSS engine.
Yep. So let's click the start button. So that's
a little bit
smoother. Then we'll do the same thing for.
Well, we could also show the properties there where you change it about the transforms.
Yeah, I was going to do it after. Okay, so the JavaScript library, it looks smoother and it does the same sort of thing. It just behaves better. So now, with those two things in mind, let's go back to jQuery and up the dots to, how much do you think?
I'd say 1,500, 3,000 is pretty horrible.
Yeah, won't load. Yeah, so there you go. As you can see, jQuery is awesome. Yeah. So don't use jQuery to animate stuff. The set timeout doesn't work well, and the garbage collection it can't handle itself and stutters a lot. So let's jump to CSS, which uses the request animation frame. It's a lot better. It's not awesome, but it's actually, it performs
a lot faster.
A lot faster, yep. And now if we switch the top left and top translate properties, what this does, there was a post on that Paul Irish wrote a while back that was comparing CSS transforms in top left and top right to translate, and he found that using the translate property was better, but what this ends up showing is that it's actually worse because translate is actually rendering subpixels, which is anti-aliasing, whereas absolute top left, top right creates a pixel snapping effect. So it's not obvious here, but on a really slow animation, it's really jerky, which isn't great. Let's show what these guys do. The JavaScript animation library. Green sock. for these guys. That's not, yeah. It's a lot better. It's actually creating the constant wave rather than just blocking then firing and blocking and firing. Okay. So, as I was talking about before with position absolute and translates like not pixel, position absolute causes pixel snapping, which it's kind of hard to tell with that demonstration. It's very fast. So I made a quick second one. Yeah, okay. Thing here. I don't know if you can see it, but translating, you can see the image is really smooth and anti-aliases.
So it's good to look right at the join there. How one of them is really like jumpy. It is quite hard to see there. Like I said, I'll put this online.
Yeah. So yeah, it's snapping. It doesn't look right. If you see it, looking at that, it's a lot nicer. Even if you have like a small animation which just goes from left to right, having it so it's rendering subpixels, it's just a lot nicer to look at. Okay.
So that's using the keyframes in CSS.
Yeah, that's using a CSS3 animation. Just translating versus position absolute. Where's the slideshow thing?
That one there, but
that one.
and then the play at the top.
Sorry about this. Okay, so what I use for creating animations. Well, first I use Modernizer. Who doesn't use Modernizer? It's what have you done? So that's just a text whether or not you can use certain things, and then outputs a class anyway, an HTML element, which I use to then I create a fallback and then I check if that class is there, remove the fallback and show what to show. So by default, the fallback is always present. I use SCSS because it's awesome. So much easier to organize your code, create variables, everything. It's just amazing. I also use auto prefixer, which I stumbled across 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And basically what it does is that after your code is finished compiling, it then runs through, and all you have to use is the latest HTML CSS3 prefixes, no prefixes. Just use the properties and it adds all the prefixes for you, which is amazing because who likes writing animations for every browser? Yeah.
If you jump to the next slide, the cool thing about it is that it will pull down the information.
Is it okay? Probably run out
Yeah, I didn't think I was able to.
Clearly doesn't like me as a
Yeah.
So what I was going to say is really cool about this library is that you hook it up as a CSS post processor. So it doesn't matter if you're using SAS or less or just native CSS. You run the output through it. It will figure out based on what can I use sort of CSS is required these days for most common prefixes. So that means that, for example, if you were to rebuild or rerun it through this, say 6 months later, we know, okay, certain older prefixes are no longer really used and the browser share is really small, it'll actually take them out, which is a good thing because then you don't have to worry about, if you're using SAS with a function to create prefixes, it'll usually just put everything that's possible in there and just load up the CSS. That's right.
Yep. Sweet. Next. Demo. Okay, so basically what I'm showing here is all those 3 things in use. So I've got a basic HTML element here, which just creates a square and puts an icon inside it, which I then specify with normal. It looks pretty normal CSS, it's SAS, but all I'm using SAS for here is just indentations, so I have to go .css, animations enabled, loading div, so it just applies it all. It creates a little bit of bloated CSS, but it's just so much easier to manage that I can't imagine much about it. I'm also using, so what I'm doing is I'm detecting if I can use a CSS animation. If I can, I hide the default GIF, which, is it GIF or GIF?
Yeah.
That whatever. Okay, so up top I have a Up top I have a normal 32 by 32 pixel GIF. And then I replace it with the SVG icon there and then animate with a rotation just to replace it. Which I do that because A, it looks nicer in my opinion, and B, it scales in different devices, so no matter what device it's going to be on, it's always going to look like that. It's not going to get all blurry on Mike's Nexus 300 and something, pixels from the screen, and you go, let's redo it again. So what it does, it reduces needing to have at 2 times images, and it works. And it has an easy fallback. And the worst case scenario, they have a blurry GIF. GIF?
Yeah. I feel like we could have a whole presentation.
GIF or GIF? GIF.
GIF is peanut butter.
In America.
It's cool.
Back to. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So, something I made, I think it was 2 weeks ago? Yeah.
Not bad,
Yeah.
Everything happened 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, I was and this happened. So on Dribble, Creative Dash posts this awesome thing, and I was like, that's cool. That shouldn't be too hard to make in HTML CSS. Thinking, well, I need to learn SVG a bit better. Surely I can just make an awesome path in Illustrator, then export it, and just have a single dash line go around, get bigger, work, and everything else is just twins galore. But I thought it would be sweet, so I gave it a crack. Whoops. And I ran into so many problems. Having never done SVG before, I saw lots of tutorials that I never looked at that were just, okay, you can easily make this SVG path be drawn by using a property, but what it didn't say was that you had to have a super long, like there's 2 options for drawing a line in SVG, or animating a line. It has to either be a fully fledged line or a dashed line. And when they have animations that fill up, it's just a massive dash with a massive empty space. So you can't have an easy animation that starts off small and gets bigger, because when you start small, you have lots of little dashes. So you can't easily, am I making sense?
There's a whole blog post on the Raygun blog about how, with lots of screenshots along the way. Suffice to say, it looks like it was horrible to put together. But, and you can click there, right?
Yep. So basically what I ended up doing is I made an SVG mask which covers point, like top point to the area of the circle, which I then have a block which I animate from like a rotation from the bottom left-hand side, and I flip it around at the right time, so it creates like a inner circle to outer circle fill, because you can't actually make a small thing that does that. I did try with SVG making a like a perfectly sized line and making the dash work, but no. So what it does is it does that, and it was a lot of work, but it works.
So we're looking at trying to employ this. This also had some browser issues, right?
Yes, SVG masks, they're not awesome. They are implemented different across multiple browsers. In HTML, in IE, they require something else, and didn't end up implementing it. In Firefox, they require the SVG path to be defined inside your HTML. That doesn't work for Chrome. It requires like a WebKit mask prefix, which is Chrome specific, which you then have to source like a proper SVG image sort of in the CSS.
Suffice to say, it's a pain in the ass to work with. But Carl's done a lot of stuff with Canvas, so we're looking at actually rolling this maybe into the Raygun web app for the new mobile stuff, but likely to actually rebuild it with Canvas, because that's a little bit more reliable than all the SVG stuff. So I can't remember who said it, but somebody mentioned they were very interested in Canvas. You should have a chat to Carl. He's done a lot of stuff with that as well.
Yeah, one of the downsides is when you want to click this lots fast, it kind of jumps around a bit, and with CSS3 animations, there's no super easy way to like pause and resume animations, which requires more JavaScript, which this requires. I mean, I'm just adding a class, and then the class is open, is closed. So it's pretty much all CSS and SVG.
It pretty much brings us to the end, which is a pretty quick run through there of some of the animation stuff. I think you did all right. First one. Good work. Two things for the housekeeping. Kyle has like 12 Twitter followers, so please follow. He's tweeted about as many times as he's got followers. And secondly, Amanda did mention earlier that we are on the lookout for someone to join our team on the front-end sort of engineering side. To be honest, we kind of need a designer and a front-end person to work with Kyle. One of the cool things about what we're doing with Raygun is it's a very developer-focused tool, so we really don't spend a hell of a lot of time thinking about old browsers, and we are spending a fair bit of time looking at some of the more interesting things that we can do to make it as sexy as possible. So if you're interested in that, come and have a chat to me or put me an email. All ears. Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Any questions?
We've got a really cool questions first from those guys. Yeah, to you. Any questions?
Yep.
So that animation example where you had the 1500s things. So I wasn't totally clear about which one was the winner there. So
the winner there was the actual
CSS3.
No, it was the JavaScript library, which is built for animations. It's faster at doing animations, just because it uses the.
Is that the case? Would that be something that would be likely to apply, or just in a sort of slightly pathological case of like 1500 things coming at you? Because presumably, like that's scaling stuff and moving stuff, which the GPU should be really good at if things are on different layers. So I'm not. I guess I'm just not understanding how JavaScript could win.
So if you want to use like JavaScript animations and stuff, it's far better just to use like a canvas element to, if you want to add lots of things to the document object or the page. Yeah. So for one example, I had made it work for only 4 or 4 pages. I had like a star date and that flickers, and I just add stars randomly on the page. If I wanted to use CSS to do that, it would just start laying out because I'm adding stars different sizes and different positions. I'm also changing the opacity, which is really heavy. So in that method, I have 2 images on the front, which I'm using CSS animation, to animate them. Then I'm using a JavaScript part to do the really complex stuff. So I'm using the 2 at the same time.
Okay, so it would win if your animation is more computationally intensive rather than just moving, scaling, shearing, rotating.
If you're doing a lot of stuff, it's always better to use JavaScript that is made for the job. If you're just doing normal stuff, CSS will win.
I think one of the other things there too is that it has come a long way in the last 2 years, and there's probably still a long way to go. And one of the issues, if you get into like game development, is that draw crawl count. So if you're actually going through and instantiating lots of different elements in a scene or something like that, you actually pretty much destroy your performance gains by trying to do too many things that will try and go with the GPU. So we actually were finding with the transform stuff there was that kind of sweet spot, right, where it actually worked kind of better, but only for a certain number of elements, and then you had the performance fall off. The example there is also blowing out lots of different things, and I remember back to our initial star field that we built in Canvas, and we literally were going back to old sort of game development guides on, hey, okay, well this is how we're going to recycle and do some instancing style things here to make it actually perform.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Any other questions? We've got this off-screen mag, and sorry, I should have said before that the other book and this one is has been donated by the Design Meetup group, so thanks to Design Meetup for that. This is Off-Screen Mag, which is a physical magazine with articles about people from the internet. So, so I don't know, do you guys have a question for us, audience? Anything related to the talk?
What is Kyle's Twitter handle?
I know. Is it K_100?
Yeah, you could polite, you raise your hand, I like that.
Yeah. Cool. That's everything for tonight. So thank you all for coming. Yeah.
Thanks
sorry
for
about
hosting.
technology problems. Robot dying.
I understand there are